Welcome and thank you for tuning in to the 412 Double Play podcast. I am, as always, host Michael Castrogano, reaching AAA this week with the Indianapolis Indians, bringing back friend of the show, one of the hosts of Just Baseball Media podcast, play-by-play commentator for the Indianapolis Indians, Jack McMullen. Jack, joining us from Florida, taking in a bunch of spring training games, spring breakout games. Obviously, we'll talk about all that in a bit, but how has your offseason been treating you?
Off-season's been good. I've been getting my 8 hours every night, which is really important. Everybody needs that. I'm not going to get them for the next 6-7 months. So I know there have been medical journals that have proven that you cannot, stockpile sleep and put some in your reserves. But I try my hardest during these winter 5 months so I can sleep, 9-10 hours a night leading up to the season. And then 6 I feel less bad about.
Yeah. I mean, games are going to be starting soon. The Indian season starts next Friday in Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, you're busy. I mentioned you're at the spring breakout games. You went to the one this past Thursday. Pirates Orioles, one of the marquee matchups. Paul Skeens starting the game, went 101, 101, 102 to the first batter. Got a ton of whiffs from the number one farm system in baseball.
Yes.
Just a one inning of work. Braxton Ashcraft, he was a bit wild, but still was pumping them in there. Hunter Barco reaching 95. He's bouncing back from Tommy John surgery 2 years ago. And then we saw some under the radar prospects. Christian Curtis, Patrick Riley, they were both 97 plus. Bubba Chandler closing the game. He showed why he's got so much hype behind him. MLB prospect guru, Jonathan Mayo, was in the broadcast booth. He said unprompted, and feel like everyone in that whole sphere feels the same way. The Pirates have by far the best pitching prospects in baseball. You got to see all these arms live. What are your thoughts, and how disappointed were you that David Matomo did not get into the game?
I was crushed. That's probably the word that I would use for it. I was crushed, but I was sad to not see Matoma. I was also sad to not see Solomito, but Solomito was under the weather. Get it? It was nothing injury related. He was just sick, and I think that was reported on the Pirates telecast too. That was really fun to be in the building for. And, you look at the O's farm system, I would say before like a Jordan Westberg graduated and before a Gunnar Henderson graduated and a couple of, those other guys like Grayson Rodriguez still had prospect status going into last year. That system might have been twice as good as the next best system in baseball when they had that fully stacked farm system. And now think about the graduations of the guys that I just mentioned. They still have the best farm system in baseball. So the fact that we saw the best pitching system in the game right now against the best system in the game right now, I was really lucky to be in Bradenton on Thursday night. And, you get Skeens seeing Jackson Holliday and Anna Kaiser, who I work with the Indianapolis Indians. She's the baseball communications manager. She tweeted out a video of a 2-pitch sequence between Skeens and Holliday. And she noted the pin drop silence. And I didn't realize it in the moment, but then I went back and I was like, you're right. This was like tiger putting. It was crazy because everybody knew what was happening in that at bat. There's, ambient noise and chatter, and there's this hum of the game that happens for all 9 innings. But when Ohtani's hitting, when, DeGrom's pitching, the hum lowers a little bit because everybody's paying attention to what's happening on the field. And that was the one example in the prospect world of everybody paying attention to what was happening on the field. So Skeens was awesome. He was bullying some of the best hitting prospects in all of baseball. That guy is he seems to fit the billing at this point already. But yeah, a couple of other arms that you mentioned. I loved watching those guys. I turned to my partner Aram Layton, who I was there with when Hunter Barco was kind of cruising through his first inning. I said, Barco looks healthy. And he really didn't even look healthy at Florida in his draft year. That was a guy that I was really impressed by just because he looked smooth and he was in control and it was fun to watch. And then I sat 1 or 2 rows up right behind home plate for Bubba in the 7th. And seeing that fastball from that vantage point, I'm thinking like, okay, you give me 1,000, I'm not touching one. It's kind of crazy what he's got going on there.
It's just a lot of talent. You mentioned Barco. He had a Tommy John surgery in May of his draft year, which is 2022.
Yeah.
Ended up falling as a second round pick for the Pirates. He was working with the pitching, I guess, coordinator. I'm not exactly sure what his role, like his official role is, but Vic Black, former Pirate, was working on refining his mechanics to have it a little bit more smooth and reduce the risk of injuring it in the future. He was hitting 92, 93 last year, but yeah, he was hitting 95 in the game last week, which was really promising to see because that's another, and left-handed, another southpaw you mentioned with Solomito. It's just a surplus of riches, of pitching riches that the Pirates have. And we didn't even get to see guys like Thomas Harrington, who was scratched, Anthony Solomito, who you mentioned, and then another one, notable omission from the Spring Breakout roster itself, Jared Jones. Now, the team stated he's firmly in the running for a rotation spot. This spring, he's done nothing to prove otherwise. 11.1 innings of shutout ball as of today, 4 innings against most of the Braves starting 9 this past Saturday, 10 strikeouts to 4 walks over the spring training. He finished strong at Indy last year. I think he had 15 starts, 16 games. The last month of the season, 2.51 ERA over his final 5 starts, 28.2 innings, 10 walks to 31 strikeouts. How do you view the competition for one of the final rotation spots and the likelihood that Jones heads to Miami to start the season?
I think Jared's earned it. I'm gonna actually pose the question to you. Do you think Jared's earned it this spring? Because I watched this guy and I think those September numbers were altered a bit by his final start, and his final start was a little weird because I'm sure you remember the speculation that he could have gone up and made a start at the big league level at the end of the year. He did not, and he got a little roughed up in his final start of the season. But his third to last and his second to last starts of the season, I think he combined for 13 innings, no runs. It was like 13 punch outs, 14 punch outs, and 1 walk. He looked as good as he had looked all year. And the fastball was great. The slider was as good as it's ever been. And he had command. And he, say something went awry. You had a little bloop single. That didn't snowball on him in that back month. So I thought he was great in that back month of the season. And he looks like a guy that's on a mission, man. And what I think it was 2 outings ago, he was sitting 100. He was like grabbing 101 consistently. So if that guy is doing that, I think he should be going to Miami. What say you?
So the big thing coming into the season, we knew the fastball and slider were good. It was just whether or not he was going to get the off speed. And that was something that I noticed in the game for the Braves. And I'm not sure if it was the changeup or the curve that he was featuring most of the time. But whatever it was like, I think in the 80s, and it was getting swings and misses, and he was locating it. And another big thing is limiting walks, and he's been limiting walks this spring. 4 walks in 11.1 innings isn't ideal, but I think he was averaging 4 walks per 9 last year, something like that.
That sounds about right.
So it's something that because he's got the floor of being a high leverage bullpen arm, but you want him to be a solid starter. He has a potential to be an ace because of his stuff, the velocity, the ability to potentially just blow it right by guys. Yeah. So the fact that he has that third pitch working, and that was something was reported that he's been working on this offseason, is going to propel him. And right now, guys like Roansy Contreras and Bailey Falter had the in for the rotation because they're out of options. Yeah. And they've just kind of imploded this spring. If you were to say, and again, I know you follow a bunch of teams, you've been focused on prospects this spring, but if you were to say, okay, it's Mitch Keller, it's Martin Perez, Marco Gonzalez, who's 4 and 5, I'm assuming you're saying Jared Jones for one of them.
Yeah, and I think the other would probably be Luis Ortiz. But yeah, I think something that I feel very strongly about is baseball more than any other sport is the closest that we get to a meritocracy, where if you are really good, you will get a shot. And we see guys that are 27, 28 years old that have been kicked around. I mean, you've got a guy that's going to be on the opening day roster in Connor Joe. Like Connor Joe in any other sport would have been phased out because of age, because of like lack of success in the upper minors. But it's a meritocracy, and he got another shot in the upper minors. He was really good, and then he debuts with Colorado. And guess what? He was good in Colorado, so now he has a big league contract. And like, I love that idea of meritocracy. And if the Pirates want to treat this as a meritocracy, and I firmly believe that they do, how can you not go to the two guys that are really performing in that battle right now, especially when, you know, the mind's been made up on a guy like Paul Skeens, right? Where, you know, we know he's going to start in the minor leagues, and a couple other guys like that. I watched the Tigers do that with Jackson Jobe and Ty Madden, two guys that could both be top 100 prospects. You could argue that Jobe is as good of a pitching prospect as Skeens. Those are probably 1 and 2 in all of baseball. But AJ Hinch, the manager of the Tigers, told Jobe and Madden at the beginning of the spring, hey, you're not breaking camp with us. That's not a lack of meritocracy, I don't think. What I think that is you can show us, you're going to be in big league camp for the next couple of weeks, maybe the month. You can show us how close you really are, instead of, you know, hey, you're pushing the rock up the hill. It's Sisyphean. Sisyphean? I don't know. But it is
Sure.
It's Sisyphean task, right? It's a tough task. But there is an end game here. So I think if this is, you know, truly merit based, I think Jones has to be in the rotation, and I'd assume Ortiz too.
I'm torn between Ortiz and Priester because I think Priester's got more upside right now, and Ortiz might long term be in the bullpen. But I'm going to shift from that and talk about just baseball stuff, because this past offseason, you guys did top 15 lists, included David Matoma at number 15. It got a lot of Pirate social media people kind of electric, because I think most fans either forgot the reports that he was signed, forgot reports that he was hitting 100 last summer, didn't believe it, never heard about it or him in the first place. We mentioned that he didn't pitch in the game, but what can you tell me about the valuations you guys have for Matoma and expectations for him going forward within the organization?
Fastball, fastball, fastball. And you see a 17-year-old with that kind of fastball. I mean, it's hard to not fall in love with it. And I was telling you before we started recording, we've gotten close with Taylor Davis, and Taylor is headed to Altoona as, you know, the catching coach in Altoona. But Taylor was also, you know, at the complex last year in his first year as a coach after he hung up the cleats, and he was pretty much like in dugout coach for Indy in 2022 and the end of 2021. But he keyed Aram Layton, who's my partner and does a great job with all those top 15s. I really am there to like copy it and be like, sorry, are you sure about this guy? But you know, he said David Matoma is a top 15 guy, and I was like, okay, like I trust you on this. He told me, I want to say 2021, like middle of 2021. He said, there's this kid in low A in Cincinnati named Ellie De La Cruz, and he's a freak, and I want to put him on the top 100. So I was like, okay, you know what? If you give me that name, I'm never going to question you again. And he's high on Matoma. So I'm like, okay, you know what? If you're high on Matoma, I'm high on Matoma. And he sent me the video. He sent me the data. And this is a kid that is 17 years old, signed when he was 16. And, you know, you mentioned he was in the low 90s at time of signing. This guy comes out, he's hitting 101 miles an hour in the Dominican Summer League and, you know, at camp in Bradenton. And not only that, you know, so much of the Skeens conversation is about fastball shape, right? Like it's 102, but it's straight, that kind of thing. 102 is 102. Matoma blends both worlds, where he just hit 101, but it's got great carry. The new buzzword in pitching, the new buzzword with fastballs is vertical break, induced vertical break. Matoma gets excellent vert from his slot. So he's the kind of guy that's going to get a lot of whiffs underneath his fastball. And if that fastball is taking off like a rocket ship at 101 miles an hour, I'm banking on big league reliever floor for a kid that's 17 years old. So I think that's what you see. The slider, Arn thinks, is already flashed plus, so he thinks that can be a good big league out pitch. But we see guys succeed and like contend for Cy Youngs in Atlanta with huge quads that throw 65% fastball, and then the remaining 35% is slider and occasionally mix in a changeup and strider. So why can't a reliever, at least that is fastball reliant, you know, be a guy that can climb quickly if they want him to be a reliever, or develop into a really strong starting pitcher if he has 101 in the back pocket, has flashed a good borderline great slider, and can improve on a third pitch.
Yeah, definitely possible. I know that walks were and control overall were a bit of a concern. You had him listed at 6 foot and 165 pounds, so he's a string bean.
Yes.
Only the third player signed out of Ghana. The first two were signed by the Dodgers, I think, 2 years ago. But it's going to be interesting to see him develop and how they move him through the system. Because as a relief pitcher, he doesn't need to throw a lot of innings. He doesn't need to be kind of like wound up as much as we're seeing.
Yeah, and I do think they will, real quick, I do think they will at least try to do the starter thing, because, why would you have somebody that young with that much potential? Like, might as well try and make it a starter thing, but you've got a fallback of a great reliever out of a, great fastball out of a bullpen, that kind of thing.
It's, again, a plethora of riches with pitching going all the way down to Dominican Summer League. Now, we did talk ahead of last season about how the Indians were poised to have one of the more interesting rotations in the minors because injuries and effectiveness didn't quite pan out. But the wave of prospects came over to Pittsburgh. Now new ones rising up to take their place. Most of the top-ranked players we mentioned, with like Chandler, Solomito, potentially even Skeens, are projected to start in Altoona, but there's certainly some talent above them. Some guys who maybe are going to be coming up to the Pirates, either some of those recent signing that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, or prospects who are just like poised to make that jump. Is there anyone who you're most excited about to start at Indianapolis for the pitching side this year?
On the pitching side, I saw Kyle Nicholas who was optioned. I'm really excited to see Kyle Nicholas close games in AAA. I think that guy can become a really good back end of the bullpen guy. We saw the arc that Carmen Mlodzinski took last year, and we were not expecting that. We had an idea that he was going to transition from being a solid starting pitcher to a bullpen arm, and you thought, okay, maybe 93, 94 can tick up. It did. But then look at that sweeper that guy got. Like he had, all offseason, and he had, all the time in the world in Indianapolis to work on 2 pitches instead of, oh, I'm a starting pitcher, I need to pace myself across 5. When I was talking to Kyle at the end of last year, it was so funny because like he got to Indy, he's a Ball State kid, like Ball State alum. He, it almost felt like he was coming home and it was happy. And then it didn't start well. Like it didn't go well out of the rotation for Kyle for like, I want to say a month or so. And you could tell that he was kind of dragging and, down in the dumps, that kind of thing. And then he goes to the bullpen and it's like, okay, great outing. Wait, you just hit 99 miles an hour. Wait, you just threw a slider at 92 and it's gross. And he strung like 3-4 solid outings together. And I go up to him when they come back home and I'm like, dude, how are you feeling right now? And he said, man, I feel awesome. And I was like, okay, good. And I asked him why. And he said, dude, it's the mentality. Like, I don't need to play the big, chess match type game where, oh, I got to see this guy 3 times. I can't show him this in this moment. And AAA hitters are too good for that at that point. Like you need to be a different level in order to play the chess match. And I think that becomes unlocked like your 3rd year in Major League Baseball. So Kyle, like abandoning that idea and saying, I can have a really good fastball, I can have a really good slider. I'm going to show every hitter I see both of them, and I can accrue outs. He unlocked a different level mentally and in terms of on the field, what he was doing on the mound. So I am excited to see him maybe dominate for a month or 2 as a reliever and hopefully get his shot in the big leagues. And then whoever really gets pinched out of the starting rotation, right? There's, I feel like, and I would echo the same thing with the hitting situation too. There are going to be guys that are big league caliber, or at least big league bench caliber, that will be pinched out because there is ample depth really everywhere except catcher with the Pirates right now. So you've got guys that are worthy of major league roster spots that are going to be in AAA kind of waiting. It's almost like the understudy team this year, as opposed to recent years where it was young guys that are in finishing school, trying to finish the maturation process to get there. Now it's, okay, you're probably ready. Let's just wait to see if a spot opens up.
Yeah, it definitely feels like supporting players, like who's going to fill that bench role, who's going to be the backup shortstop. Is it going to be Alika Williams? Are they going to have Triola Peguero kind of figure out some sort of supplement there? Nick Gonzalez, is he going to start? Going to get into the offense in a second. I did want to talk Nicholas. The issue with him obviously was control. Had 13.9% walk rate in Indianapolis last year, bumped up a bit to 15.4 in small sample size with the Pirates. But strikeout rate, like you mentioned, 30.8%. And that's going the full year, which included some time when he was, I think, still in the rotation. Oh, no, he was in the rotation in Double-A, right? When he moved to Triple-A,
he was in the rotation in Double-A.
Okay, so 30.8% strikeout rate in Indianapolis. I mean, that's pretty elite. That's going to be like top 10, top 15 if he would be able to continue that into major leagues. It's a lot. It's strong depth, and like you mentioned, it's supporting players. It's like the understudies. If somebody falters in that top level, there's somebody who can come up who is able to replace them. We talk all the time. Brian Hayes with his back injuries and the fact that he has been susceptible to having to have some time down. Jared Triolo on any other team would be a Gold Glove caliber third baseman. But because we have the best defensive third baseman in baseball, he's maybe at second base, maybe a utility guy. On the offense, and again, Triolo came up last year. Peguero made the jump. Davis, I know you didn't get to see him too long at Indianapolis. Endy, like a bunch of guys came up last year. Who's left? Who's left in Indianapolis for the offense side?
That's a good question. So whoever gets pinched out of the infield situation, right? So like one of, or maybe two of Alika, Nick Gonzalez, Triolo's not going to get pinched out, but like Peggy, there are a bunch of guys like that, hey, you've got your answer at all these places. Like Cruz is back and, you hope he's healthy for 162. So, you go in with a set plan in the infield and like, who's going to fill out that bench? Is G1 Bay going to make the roster? There are a lot of questions about like those fringe type guys. And I know Bay's going to start the year on the IL, it seems. So like, I do find it pretty interesting. Who gets pinched out of that situation. I think the quote unquote intriguing names at the top of the Indians lineup are going to be guys that have major league service under their belt. But in terms of guys that, kind of have that upward mobility still that haven't been there, like where does Sung Chae Chang open the year? Is it in Altoona or is it in Indianapolis? A guy like Matt Gorski has been very fun. And Gorski is on the older side, but he hits a bunch of homers and he swipes a bunch of bags and he's, got defensive versatility. So it's guys like that I'd be curious about. And then you have, all the minor league free agent signings. So like, a Jake Lamb, he's probably going to be in Indy. A Seth Beer is going to be in Indy, those kind of guys. So it's going to be after my first 2 years in Indy, we're very young and very prospect laden. I think this might be veteran and guys that, may have opt-outs midway through the season, that kind of thing.
It definitely seems like it's going to be older. You mentioned Gorski had another 2020 season last year for the Indians, 20-team league in the International League. The Indianapolis 4th in batting average, 5th in on-base percentage, 9th in OPS, 1st in triples. Kind of crazy.
It's the ballpark, man. It's like, I think it's 417 to left center. So like any righty that hits the ball in the gap, it's off to the races and get moving.
Yep, and that's kind of what I was thinking for the next part, because they were tied for 15th in home run. Now, Gorski, obviously 20 home runs. Malcolm Nunez had some injuries. He has that home run potential. Is there a big hitter in waiting that hasn't really unlocked stuff in Indianapolis? Or are you expecting someone like Seth Beer is going to just sit in Indy all year and maybe just go for like 20 plus?
I mean, he's got like the first round pedigree, right? He was a masher at Clemson, and the Astros loved him. Astros, Diamondbacks, like both those teams loved him. I know that those were his previous two. I think he started with the Astros. He was drafted by Houston, and then went to Arizona. But yeah, like Beer could be that guy that has 20 homers. Aaron Shackelford was pacing for 20 at that point too. That guy packs a punch, man. He's a fire hydrant in every sense of the word. So I think there are guys that could absolutely flirt with it. And you also just think about how the game has, almost like transformed where, you shake a player's hand and you expect them to be way thinner than they are. And then it's like, wow, you have veins in your forearm that I don't think I could get if I was in the weight room for a year. Like it's that kind of thing. So I think these guys are very powerful. They know that homers are value. Whether you like that or not, homers are value in arbitration hearings. And, it's just one of those things that I feel like there might be a bunch of guys that could flirt with 15. But in terms of 20 homer guys, yeah, like Beer, Nunez, Shackelford, and Gorski are the four that jump to mind.
Yeah. Beer was drafted by the Astros and then I guess traded to the Diamondbacks. Yep. So switching over to the Pirates, they made a splash on Friday night within like 2 hours of each other, signing former Gold Glove outfielder Michael A. Taylor, $4.5 million, and then a minor league deal for right-handed pitcher Domingo Germán, $1.5 million for 2024 mutual option for 2025. Germán obviously had the most recent perfect game in MLB history. And Taylor, 10-year vet, fresh off a 21 home run campaign with the Twins. More known for his defense, 55 outs above average, 72 defensive runs saved in his career. Yeah. I think that it was kind of a weird Friday night for Pirates fans because Taylor had long been speculated as the guy that they should go after to bolster defense at the major league level, provide a solid center fielder. Sawinski was like about replacement level there.
Yeah.
But Germán has been rumored in the past and obviously has off the field incidents, multiple suspensions for MLB's domestic violence policy. Taylor is most likely going to start with the Pirates. I don't see a reason not to, but Germán likely heading to Indianapolis. What are your thoughts on the signing, at least what you're comfortable saying publicly?
Yeah, so I'll start with Taylor real quick. I loved that get. I loved the on-the-field get, especially with Endy out for the year. And that was a brutal development from Lydom when Endy tore his UCL on a swing. So I love Endy. I got to know him, good bit. I picked him up because he was headed to the Futures game when I was headed to the Futures game for just baseball. And Alaskan Airlines, before the door flew off, Alaskan Airlines nonstop Indy to Seattle. I was texting Endy and was just like, hey, you want me to pick you up? So we hopped in the same Uber and flew out to Seattle together. So he's a good dude, man. Yep. And I'm hoping for a quick recovery, and he seems happy and all that. And I know he was on the telecast for Spring Breakout as well. So he's making his rounds. But this year, if Endy was healthy, I would assume that they would run out Reynolds in left, Sawinski in center, Henry in right again. Yeah. But Endy's not healthy, so they fully bought back into the Henry catching thing, especially with Grandal dealing with that, plantar fasciitis. So now that Henry's catching, you can take Sawinski, make it, turn him from like a pretty solid defensive center fielder to a good defensive right fielder, and you add a great defensive center fielder in Taylor. So I loved that fit. It felt like they were fitting puzzle pieces perfectly. Germán is a loaded conversation. And Ben Cherington was asked about it on Pirates telecast, and he said they did their due diligence, and you got to trust the Pirates on doing their due diligence, and he is one of those guys that it's not a fun thing to be around, and he's clearly made some mistakes, and I'm sure he would be the kind of guy that would tell you he's made mistakes. It'll be interesting to see how he looks because, you have no idea when a guy shows up to spring training late. Is Indy going to be a ramp up place for him and he joins Pittsburgh? Or, if Jared's pitching well, if Ortiz or Priester is pitching well, does he even have a spot in Pittsburgh? So we'll see what happens there. But 1.5, I have to assume the Pirates did ample research into, both scenarios that Herman has been disciplined for. And yeah, he's going to be a fascinating guy to watch for sure.
Yeah. I mean, everyone likes a redemption story. And if he does well on the field, off the field, something that the Pirates are keeping an eye on. You mentioned Jerrington talking on the telecast the other day about it. That's what they're looking at, for him to show exemplary citizenry, essentially.
Yeah.
They also mentioned,
you got to confront it too. Like Jerrington needed to talk about it. If he went on that telecast and he didn't say anything, you're raising more questions. Then he came on, he spoke about it. He knew he needed to nip it in the bud in terms of like just addressing the signing and what they expect from him. And I think it's pretty clear that they have an established set of things that they are looking for.
Sure. And I mean, like, either way, if he can pitch, they'll figure it out. If he can't pitch, it's not going to matter. They won't pick up that option. With the Sawinski situation, you mentioned he might go back to right field, but the past couple of games, they've been putting Reynolds in right field. They've mentioned that Sawinski might be moving to left. He's a little bit more mobile, better on reads going backwards. Obviously, PNC Park has a more cavernous left field, so possible that he gets shifted over there. And I think overall that will improve the defensive layout of the Pirates in the outfield. Obviously, Key Brian Hayes, Gold Glover at third base, Rowdy Tellez. Cruz just hit another home run. Rowdy Tellez is he can catch the ball if it's right at his chest, but it's going to be a mixed defense. The offense, though, as I mentioned, Cruz hitting another home run. We're recording this in the afternoon on March 18th. Sawinski's been on a hot streak coming into today, 8 for his last 14, 3 home runs last week, 2 doubles. Cruz is now, I guess, tied for the lead in home runs in all of spring training, or is it just Grapefruit League?
In all of spring training. All of spring training.
No.
Wyatt Langford has 5. Wyatt Langford I think is still the OPS leader, which is absolutely insane. Like, if you're drafting
and
in
might
fantasy
not
baseball,
make opening day roster.
Yeah, like if you're drafting in fantasy baseball, take that dude 25 picks before you think he's going to go, because he's amazing. But yeah, he and Stowers are tied for the spring training lead. Kyle Stowers is actually a guy that I've kind of been all over the last 2 years because, like you ask anybody to play the game, hey, what does the 2025 end of season roster look like for the Baltimore Orioles? You're putting together this dream lineup that includes Holiday and Kobe Mayo and Basayo and everything, right? You're putting together best possible outcome. Stowers isn't even on the bench. Like, Stowers isn't making that bench, but Stowers is a guy that is way too good for AAA. I was hoping that, like, hey, you needed a spot to fill in the corner. You've got a great system. Why don't the Pirates target a guy like Kyle Stowers? Like the Miami Marlins could target a guy like Stowers. He's a big leaguer that is masquerading as a AAA masher. So whatever. But Cruz, that's legit terrifying in a good way.
Yeah. His exit velocity today was over 100 on at least 3 of the balls I saw hit. But for the outfield, you mentioned corner outfield spot. We have the addition of Taylor, Gilberto Celestino, Billy McKinney. They're continuing to have a strong spring. They're NRI guys right now, but are doing what they need to be doing to potentially earn a 40-man spot. Having conversations there. On the pitching side, already mentioned Jones, how well he's looked. Mitch Keller, 4 shutout last week. Velo was up a little bit. Starting to see a return to form for him. Didn't end the season great. Marco Gonzalez, excellent outing. 5 innings, 1-run ball. Quinn Priester, strong start. Outside of 1 blow-up inning where he gave up a grand slam, granted. He's looked really strong.
Yeah.
And then the bullpen, there's going to be openings because Dari Moretta's down. You've got Brent Honeywell, Willie Peralta, Josh Flemings, Chase Anderson, Hunter Stratton. Fleming's the only one there who's on the 40-man currently, but these guys all kind of in competition for that role. I know your focus, again, has been on prospects, has been on the breakout games. You've been running around in your sandals and shorts down there in nice warm weather, Florida. Yeah. But as someone who generally knows ball, follows the Pirates, at least strongly on the AAA side, how are you feeling about their chances entering 2024?
I've got a lot of people on social media that tell me that I don't know ball, so that's a very nice thing for you to say. Thank you. I feel good about them, and it feels like they have made a very concerted effort to become more competitive year by year. And you do that by developing talent in the minor leagues. If you are, a market like Pittsburgh, and like think about the best players in recent memory for the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're not $150 million free agent signings. Like, that's never going to be the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's never been my, hometown Chicago White Sox that I grew up rooting for. The biggest deal they've ever handed out is $75 million for Andrew Benintendi, and that's going swimmingly right now. But like, it's a tough one where, you're never going to be the Dodgers where you can fork over 700 for Ohtani. You do it by finding guys like an Andrew McCutchen that can blossom into an MVP. You do it by finding guys like Jack Sawinski, who came over as the secondary piece in that deal with San Diego in 2021, and he now blossoms into a guy that can hit 25 homers at the major league level and play really good defense in a corner. And Brian Reynolds, I mean, you got him for a guy that's on the roster right now from San Francisco. So I love that Pirates fans finally have the opportunity to see what they've been waiting for happen at the major league level. They've had their number one overall pick matriculate to being a full-time Major League Baseball player in Henry Davis. They have first-round picks that are making their way. They've got a guy in the second round like Jones in 2020 that is knocking on the door. I have no insider information on it, but like, you have to assume it's only a matter of weeks or months before the next number one overall pick matriculates to the big leagues. And, you're tuning into every pitch that guy throws in skiing. So like, I do think that Pirates fans should have tasted a little bit last year what all the young guys up at the same time, like that young excitement, what that can do for a fan base. And this year, I think, might be the year where you see the guys that came up in 2020 blend with the guys that came up in 2023, and it creates this cohesive unit that, can flirt with winning 80 games, can flirt with a 500 season, maybe, a little bit better.
And with the added wild card and a still pretty weak NL Central, you're looking at the Brewers, and they're in like a semi-rebuild. Brandon Woodruff out for the year. Corbin Burns now pitching for the Orioles. The Cubs have made some additions, but pretty much just Imanaga and bringing back Bellinger. The Reds are very young and might be great, or they might have a sophomore slump. And then the Cardinals, their biggest acquisition this offseason, is going to start the season on the injured list in Sonny Gray. I mean, I think that it is a very winnable division, and this team has a chance. I mean, I'm the optimistic podcaster for the Pirates, but
I love that. I love it.
I know you talked to Craig a couple weeks ago, and he's probably less positive than I am on this stuff, but because not every prospect's going to hit, but we have so many of them of such quality all coming up around the same time that the odds are that some of them are going to be at least good. They don't all have to be great, but they're not all going to be terrible.
So I think the Pirates and the Reds are in really good situations. I think the Cubs are in a really good situation too. And the Brewers have a top 3 system in baseball, and the Cardinals are the Cardinals. But like, I really want to ID the Reds for the sake of this thought exercise that I'm going to walk you through real quick. Think about what Cincinnati did this offseason. They go and sign Frankie Montas, who was named their opening day starter over a guy like a healthy Hunter Green, right? Like, they think Montas might be a frontline guy that he was in Oakland. They also sign a Nick Martinez. So what do? You create this log jam in the starting rotation where they've got, Montas, they've got Nick Martinez, but they've got Hunter Green, they've got Graham Ashcraft, Andrew Abbott. Then you have Nick Lodolo, who's still banged up, but he may come back. But a guy like Connor Phillips, who made his debut at the end of the year. Brandon Williamson showed somewhat well. Then you've got a top prospect in Chase Petty that looks like he's close. That's 9 deep that you can turn into at the end of 2024. And the beauty of baseball is you only need 5 of them to be good. So, like, you can whiff on nearly half of them and still feel really good about where your rotation is. And I think the Pirates, it might not be this year, might be next year, should feel really good about the volume that they can shoot at, especially in starting pitching. And that for me is the end all be all. If you have a good starting rotation, everything else is going to follow because guys are going to want to hit for that starting rotation too.
Yeah, Pirates might not have it at the start of the year, but by middle of the year, end of the year, we've definitely got the cavalry coming. All right. Anything else with the Indians you wanted to talk about? You pivoted to the Reds there, but their
Sorry,
AAA team is Louisville, right? The Bats.
Yeah, AAA team's Louisville. That's where Indy opens on
That's where we're heading
Friday. But
next. Yeah.
yep, that's where they'll be next. No idea who's going to be throwing for the Indians in that one, but they open at home that following Tuesday, which I think might be April 1 or April 2. No, it's going to be good. I'm super excited to be back in Indy. I firmly believe that is the best ballpark in all of minor league baseball, and I get to sit next to the legend again, Howard Kellman. I think this is year 48 as the voice of the Indians that he's entering, and 50 years since his first one. Yeah, it was like 74 was his first year, that he was off in 75, on in 76, off in 77. So 48th season. But it's been 50 years since he took over as the voice of the Indianapolis Indians.
And then off in 2020.
Off in 2020. Good point. Forgot about that one.
Yeah. Math. All right. Well, that wraps it up for all of us here at the 412 Double Play Podcast. Thanks for jumping on the show with us. Talk Indians, Pirates, a little bit of everything here. If you don't already, check out Just Baseball Show, part of Just Baseball Media, podcast covering major leaguers, prospects with the Call Up podcast. You guys had frequent guest of yours on the show just today, Walker Buehler. It's just fun. It's just fun to listen. You guys know people, so you get some interesting guests on the show. And if you don't already follow Jack on X at Jack_McMullen11. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's under his face right now. Of course, listen to him alongside Howard when the Indianapolis Indians kick off their 2024 season next week, March 29th against the Louisville Bats. You can follow me on X at 412 Double Play. Continue listening to the show, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever else podcasts can be found. Subscribe so you get notified when we drop our new episodes. We're a day late this week, but hopefully you guys appreciate the content on that. Check out the article, steelcity.com, link in the description. As always, thank you for checking out the show from all of us here at the 412 Double Play Podcast. Thank you for joining this week, and let's go Bucks.
Lady Jolly Roger, dude.